Hi, and welcome to the Overtime Leader podcast. I'm your host, Gillian Davis, and I'm the founder of Overtime Leader. Overtime Leader exists because we want to help leaders of today build the playbooks for the future and navigate the uncertainty that comes with leading in the 21st century. This podcast is here to give you an inside look into the lives of other leaders, and I hope that you get some inspiration, some insight, but most importantly, that you don't feel alone in the journey of being a leader. In today's episode, I have a fantastic conversation with Oana, who's one of the co-founders of Dexory. Dexory is such an interesting client for us because, well, most importantly, they have a hardware element. They have built these fantastic robots that scan warehouses and create a digital twin. So that means that someone who runs a warehouse has complete insight into everything in there and where they might need some gaps, some shortages, but it's a fantastic product. It's so out of my wheelhouse because I'm obviously not a supply chain expert, but I'm able to help them scale their leadership as they scale the business because they are just going from success to success and most have recently closed their Series B. Oana runs their sales team, and in this episode, we talk about the importance of having that go-to-market mindset really early on in the process. I was keen to get her on. There's 3 founders to pick from, all of whom have fantastic stories and interesting insight, and I might get all 3 of them on the podcast one day. But I wanted to start with Oana because commercialization, especially of a high-tech product, it tends to be something that trips people up along the way, or we think about it too late, or we don't think about it enough, or we think we need to outsource it because as founders, we're not salespeople. Wrong. So I wanted to get her on to share the insights of how they started to think about go-to-market really early, some of the lessons they've learned, especially going into the US, and some of the cultural differences in the sales process, and what we can take from that. And most importantly, her role as a founder, as a leader in a high growth company. Again, they've gone from strength to strength. They're doubling their team size. That also looks very different for a leader as they go through that process. You cannot stay the same, and you've got to constantly be learning, adapting, and leading the business in a way that the business needs, not necessarily where you feel comfortable. So lots to gain from this episode, some fantastic insights, really rich conversation with Oana. I'm sure you're going to get something from it. If you want to dive a little bit deeper, remember the online course that we've just launched is still available for free for the immediate term. I will link that out. It covers everything a leader might need to know, from shaping your leadership style to leading change. How do you hire a great team? How do you fire a team? And most importantly, how do you create those dynamics that breeds the high performance culture? So take a look at that. I'm looking for feedback. It's my early product launch. But all in all, hope you enjoy this episode and look forward to hearing your comments. Hi, Oana. Welcome to the Overtime Leader podcast. I'm really excited to have you on today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, and always great to chat. So happy to be here.
So I think we're going to be able to cover a lot today. But for starters, why don't we give folks a little bit of context into who you are and your journey to becoming one of the co-founders of Dexory?
Sure thing. So, first of all, just like you just said, co-founder at Dexory and also chief commercial and product officer. So looking after our sales, marketing, customer success, and product teams. Definitely not something that I thought about of becoming when I was a little girl. So doesn't go that far back. Although I think somewhere deep down, I always kind of thought about this idea of having a business one day. So maybe some crossovers there. But I think if I kind of go back, I come from a family of 7 doctors. So there was always kind of like a pretty well kind of stacked up red carpet for me, waiting for me to graduate and go into medical school and medical profession. But I don't think I ever had like the slightest inclination towards it. So I kind of got into marketing, PR, management studies quite early on. Kind of went to university doing that, and then moved over to working in tech pretty much kind of from my first role. So the kind of journey towards founder was more the journey towards tech. And in most of my roles, I spent some time at Telefonica, at O2, and then at Google. And then in both of those companies, I was working a lot on go-to-market, on kind of understanding how to build a product, understanding kind of what customers need, what users need, turn that into features, and then kind of taking them to market. So it was more of a journey of a curiosity and love for bringing things to life and to market. Hence why I think, yeah, then I moved into this with kind of my journey to being a founder. But because I mean, I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a co-founder. There's two others. Which again, it's a very interesting topic because my kind of business background obviously had to be paired up with somebody who actually can build stuff. So the other two are very much kind of techies to heart, and the guys building the product itself. And I kind of came to it more to complement that, and obviously kind of make sure that somebody pays us for it. So I think, yeah, it's a journey to a co-founder, which I think is quite interesting because obviously there's a lot of people out there building businesses on their own. However, I feel like in my case, I mean, that probably wouldn't have been possible. Hence why I'm always kind of proud to have the guys as part of the journey with me.
Love that. And I think it's really timely. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on was to talk about the importance of having that commercial go-to-market mindset and thinking so early on in the process, whereas a lot of the founders that don't have a co-founder like yourself with those skills, who don't, know about sales or feel intimidated by the process and think they need to hire it outside, we need to make sure that people want to buy the product, not just make sure that it's a good product, but that people want to buy it. Has that been an interesting balance for you, bringing that mindset into the build side of the business?
It definitely has, and I think I mean, to your point earlier about people have one skill or the other. It is quite hard to kind of find your match in somebody else who can come and complement, obviously, with the other skill set. But it is essential, and I think, yeah, the longer you delay it, the harder it is to actually kind of, yeah, bring something meaningful to the market. In my case, I think I had to kind of always push and always kind of educate the guys, like, okay, we're building this, but to what end? And then cool tech on its own is not going to build a business, right? It's going to build an interesting product, but that's pretty much as far as you go. So sometimes you kind of have to bring that education in. But I think what we've been really good at is to not just build tech for tech's sake. Is always kind of have in mind, okay, where is this going to go? Who's going to use this? And hopefully, I think, yeah, my background kind of helped a little bit to bring that discipline early on.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And speaking of cool tech, I've just realized we're leaving everyone on a cliffhanger. What is Dexory?
Should have started there. Yeah, of course. So at Dexory, we are a robotics and AI company based in the UK, as you could imagine. And we have, well, the world's tallest autonomous robot that works in warehousing and logistics. So we pretty much can scan warehouses day in, day out using these kind of really tall robots and build real-time digital twins of the spaces that we scan. So pretty much enable our customers to, any point in time, know exactly what stock they have where, how that moved, optimize their space, their goods, and other resources by using that data collected by the robot. So yeah, people who work in logistics will get that immediately. People from the outside will probably like, what? But do go to our website and kind of see the videos because hopefully they'll paint the full picture.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal product. And, having worked in a lot of SaaS companies or pure tech companies, having that hardware element does make it so much more interesting and, yeah, really cool experience because it brings the tech to life and I think creates a lot of energy because you can point at the thing and see it move, and it's really, really fun. So would recommend, even if you're not in logistics, to check out the videos because it's very cool tech. Now, we've been working together for, I think, coming up to a year almost, and you came to me because you had gone through a scaling experience already, and now it's been 12 months later, and it's a completely different company from where we were 12 months ago. So you've gone through that kind of 90-degree growth spurt in the past 12 to 18 months and are on continued growth trajectory. Talk me through a little bit of that journey for you, because I think that's what, no one can train anyone. No experience can give you, the tools or the playbook on how to scale. So I'd love to hear a little bit for you, especially from a commercial angle, what that's been like.
It's a lot to cover in there, and I think, yeah, it's daily there's kind of new lessons to be learned from that. I think context wise, we did go from probably about 20 people, I think, at the beginning of 2023 to over 100 at the end of 2023, and now kind of over 160. So it's a trend there. Yeah, it's growing. And apart from the fact that obviously you're more people, that comes with different elements, right? So you need more people because obviously you need to build more product because customers want that product, and at the end of the day, you also need the money to build the specific product. So it's kind of like an ongoing circle of things that you constantly have to balance. It's the market demand with having what to serve that market with, and obviously kind of the resources to build it. So the growth hasn't kind of happened out of nowhere. It kind of happened because, like I said, all these kind of different elements are growing in parallel. And with it, I mean, there's multiple things. I mean, from the fact that, like I said, there were 20 people at the beginning of 23, and very much as founders, we're still in the weeds on every single detail, very much driving a lot of it. And we start to bring the first leaders into our business, into our team, and even defining like what are those, who are those, and what do we actually mean by a leader at Dexory. And that was quite an interesting kind of a conversation to be had internally, and a journey to go on. And then once you have people in as founders learning how to let go of certain things or kind of trust your leads that they're doing the right thing, empowering them. And sometimes because we would grow people from the inside as well, just giving them the right skill set to be able to become people managers, kind of cross departments, obviously coordinators and so on. I'm saying a lot here, but I think it's, as a founder, I think, there's a few key lessons. One is like understanding what you need, both people and skill set. Two is letting go. And then third, kind of giving those people the right tools to succeed.
Which one was the one that came most naturally to you? Or do you feel like your previous background equipped you for?
It's a great question. I think I didn't struggle as much on the letting go part as my other co-founders, but I'm also quite fortunate because I managed to kind of find some incredible leads to take some of that stuff on and really kind of trust them on it. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. I think if you kind of find the right people, then it makes things a lot easier. So yeah, that was probably kind of the easiest. And just because I've been used to organizations that are fantastic at kind of that delegation and building that support system around their people to be able to actually kind of own what they're doing and drive that forward. It was something that I was also kind of expecting. So probably that was the most natural.
Right. Because you've seen what it looks like at scale. And I think that's so important. You're a founder, you're going to be so involved with so much, but eventually bit by bit, it's not about letting everything go at once, but bit by bit, finding those right people that you can hand over parts of the organization to, because
And there's been a lot of kind of back and forth. I'm pretty sure like you've seen this online, obviously with articles around kind of founder-led versus manager-led.
Yeah.
I'm kind of in the mind that you kind of have to have both, because it's just otherwise it's just not sustainable and there is no scaling. Like if you still have to be involved in every little thing, it's important. Like you're gonna become a bottleneck, right? So it's a matter of kind of understanding what to let go and when, and to what extent are you letting that go, and how you're building a process to still kind of keep in tune with your leads to kind of get a pulse on the business and to be available when they need you to, and so on. So I'm kind of like middle ground on that. But your point is because I think I've seen it working at scale. And don't get me wrong, not all the leads and kind of VPs at the big tech companies I worked on were amazing. You always kind of have a mix of things, right? But where it worked well, it worked incredibly well. So I'm kind of hopeful that we can get there.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was on holiday when that launched, and I like dipped into LinkedIn and saw it everywhere: founder mode, manager mode, and like you, I kind of shut my phone immediately and was like, it's not black and white. Like that, the answer is it's not black and white. It's not binary. You need the balance of, there are some areas as a founder myself, I am going to be so in the weeds in the details. I know that. But I also have to constantly be evolving and checking myself of actually, is it okay to let go of this now? And there's probably someone more qualified who could set up a process that I just need to be unconsulted or informed. And I don't need to be in that anymore. But this stuff over here, I definitely, because of my knowledge, because of the experience and all, I will never let go of that stuff. I was worried a little bit that it would give some founders permission to lean more into areas where actually it's not about ego, it's about scale. And to your point, if you can't let go, you can't grow the business.
I do have to say, and I mean, for people who are not aware, I mean, this is an article we're talking about that, you can probably kind of find online. But one point that was kind of mentioned in there is kind of when you do have kind of venture capital and obviously kind of you go through series A, B, C and onwards, there's a massive kind of push from the board and from investors to bring in people that have done this before and that they're qualified. And I think, yeah, that's where kind of things start to be a little bit out of control because they just assume that, well, if somebody has done this somewhere else, they must be able to do it here and better than yourself as a founder. And to your point, that's where you kind of have to draw the line. Wait a second, let's have a conversation and decide on that. So I agreed with that part. It's kind of like force functioning it. But yeah, there needs to be a balance because again, otherwise you're never going to be able to really kind of scale at the right level.
And I think I've seen founders do exactly that. They've been pushed to, no, it's time to bring in the big Silicon Valley executives now. And, those folks need onboarding just as much as a junior employee. And what I've seen is because they have this experience, they're kind of given the keys to the castle or a whole department and go run it. And then they run it in the wrong direction because that was the direction they ran it in their previous place. And, it's a big mess and all that stuff. So I think it's, that balance of when you bring in senior hires, you need to bring them in properly, sit with them, like almost they have to unlearn what they might have learned in another business. And you've got to mold them and shape them to be the right executive for your business. That's where, you find that balance. You've brought in some great executives. What have you found worked to make sure that they, do it the Dexory way, as you're also defining what the Dexory way is?
And that's a very, very kind of good point to touch on because, and you mentioned kind of onboarding them just like you would a junior hire. I would actually say it's a lot more than you would a junior hire because they probably would have a much more narrow kind of world of work, right? And it's easier and quicker to kind of let them go. And also the impact if they make a mistake is not going to be as bad, right? So what I've kind of learned with my leads is giving them a lot of time and really kind of be available a lot to try and kind of guide them and understand what they're doing, why they're doing, and also be open to accepting some of the things that they were doing before that could actually work in our organization as well. So it's not just like, okay, you're in here and now you have to do it the Dexory way. It's like, okay, how did you do it before? Which way do you think is better? And can we find some middle ground? And funnily enough, I mean, yeah, I was just kind of having this conversation with somebody that came in to help on a leadership role, but a kind of slightly narrower kind of part of the business. And they were saying like, I'm really struggling because this is not how I'm used to working, and I want to embrace the Dexory way, but I just need more time. And I was like, well, but let's pause for a second. Like, why do you think the Dexory is not working? And let's see if we can adapt the Dexory way more towards you were doing before, because maybe that was better, right? So you need to kind of like find the middle ground. But to me, the biggest one is just give people time and don't expect them to just come in and have an impact on day one just because they are senior and they know what they're doing. Because to your point, it might just not work for us. And we've had a few instances where we got massively burned on that. So yeah,
it happens. No interview process is 100%.
Exactly. And there was no kind of ill-intended kind of challenge there. It was literally just people realize actually I can't work in this environment because, especially if they're coming, like to your point, from like later stage companies and even kind of corporate roles, they might kind of land into a complete mode of uncertainty, which is just natural for a company at our stage. And I keep trying to remind people, guys, like it's the first time somebody's ever doing what we're doing, so you can't expect it to be an old machine. So I think, the instances were more the expectation setting that, things are more oiled than they were. And then they kind of came in and panicked. But I think we're getting better at that at interview stage to really kind of voice it and make sure people know what to expect.
A question actually on that, and I might put you on the spot a little bit. But as founders, the Dexory way is very inherent to who the three of you are. And like with any founding team, there's just this kind of unspoken language and things are just, of course it's done like that because that's the way it should be. But it's really challenging to pull that out, articulate it, and, give people the playbook of defining what the Dexory way is, that they can actually do something with it. How are you finding that process? Is it intentional? Is it happening like by accident? Is it being forced out? Because I think that's something that, I've seen myself, people really, really struggle with and sometimes never are able to do.
It's very hard because I feel my perspective is somebody kind of puts in front of me a piece of paper and say, okay, you're expected to now behave like this because this is how we do things here. it's just never going to work. That's why I'm like never a big fan of, these are 5 values and plastering them all over the page or you turn around. There's an element of like communicating and reminding people of obviously what you stand for, but the most important one is living and breathing it. And I think we try a lot to lead by example, as founders and our leads as well. But to your point, it's like you haven't defined it yet, but you can sense the behavior. So the moment people start behaving in a particular way or kind of saying things in a particular way, it just kind of lands and you're like, oh, wait a second. Like, yeah, there's been some sort of kind of, I don't know, sharing of culture with your wider team. There's definitely a lot more that we need to do to try and explain it, somehow kind of be able to pass it on, because what's happening is like it definitely goes to people that are working quite closely with us, but then the bigger challenge is like how do you then push it to the rest, and then how our managers and leaders then push them to their own teams if they're not as good as kind of like articulating it or they're earlier in their roles. So I think, yeah, short answer, haven't kind of nailed it yet. And it's still very much about kind of like, yeah, just kind of leading by example. But the more people you have being that example, then obviously the easiest it is to filter down to everyone.
Yeah, it's so tricky because when you see it, and I feel like, but it's so hard to articulate it on if I gave you a blank sheet of paper and wrote down what's the Dexory way, you'd be like, But then if you see it in action, you're like, that's it. And capturing that and
yeah,
codifying it. I think I've heard that a lot. And you're expanding to the US.
Yes.
And that is how, like, what are you thinking about? How are you approaching it? What are you learning? Global expansion, lots comes with that.
I mean, to be super honest, the hardest thing I'm finding is hiring in the US.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to stereotype in any shape or form. And obviously kind of, I have a lot of friends from the US and I work with a lot of people, they're customers as well. Like we have quite a lot of customers already over the pond, but it's kind of like hiring and the process of hiring and the conversations you're having, the hiring process, they're completely different. So I think there's a certain level of, it's hard to kind of put it into words, but there's a certain type of process that people follow in Europe, not just the UK, but actually kind of across Europe where, I mean, yeah, this is kind of what we need. This is roughly like the salary band. You kind of have a conversation, then you kind of end up on it. Whereas in the US, you feel like that kind of happens and then you start a whole negotiation process where it's very kind of hard to understand, like, does the person actually, are they actually kind of passionate about kind of joining us, or is it just more about just the financial transaction that we're discussing here? And again, I might be completely wrong because it's just the nature of the way that hiring is happening over there from a lot of people that are telling me. But you kind of start to lose a little bit faith in the person, and that's not fair to them. So I feel like I'm still learning a lot how to navigate that. It's something we need to kind of get our heads together on very, very quickly, because otherwise, like, yeah, we'll end up not having anyone over there, which is not what you want. So yeah, if there is anyone out there that has gone through scaling up in the US that has any tips, please drop me a message on LinkedIn, because it is definitely a very big pain point at the moment.
Yeah. And imagine for every, region that you expand to, you'll have your version of this, whatever the learning curve may be.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, I can't kind of comment too much because so far, I mean, we do have team members across Europe, and very much kind of used to the European way of doing things, which is very close to the UK one. But I feel like this is the first time where we're struggling with the market, and it's interesting to kind of hear why. So
yes. And how about from a commercial point of view? Has there been any difference in how you sell the product?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I thought that was going to be harder, right? And then finding team members. But we are finding that, first of all, customers move very, very quickly. They understand, like, they know what they want. And the moment that they see it, they're like, okay, let's do this, right? And then you kind of move into your typical kind of contracting and procurement process. And that happens very, very quickly. Whereas, obviously, yeah, on the European and the UK side, that can take quite a while. I've heard this a lot of times where the business dynamic is just kind of accelerated because people want to get to the solution as quickly as possible. It does feel like that's the case. So yeah, I think that's why so far, like, it's been going really, really well for us. So
nice. Maybe it's a pattern there with the interview technique. They just want to get to that solution very quickly. Whereas, yeah, things here are more thought through.
Exactly.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought, sales processes, especially in this market, are very up and down. So it's refreshing to hear that that's going quickly.
Yeah, and I was actually in the US a couple of months ago, and we had a brief kind of presentation and workshop around kind of selling to the US, and there were some really kind of interesting tips that the person was sharing with us. I mean, one of them was if you've got somebody's attention, just make sure that you just reply and you're on it immediately, because the moment you lose it, that's it. You've lost it for a very long time, because they probably kind of pulled into something else. So the attention span of a buyer is quite short. So you always have to like respond immediately, share what they need, have it already. And that's what kind of enables you to move quite quickly through the steps, because otherwise, like, yeah, the longer you leave it, the probability is they're going to be given a different priority and they're going to go that way. Yeah, and another interesting one is, so people use the phone a lot more. So I think in Europe we're kind of like hiding behind emails more and more. And in the US people just want to have a chat, and then they're open for you to call them. Yeah, there are a few others in there, but I think, yeah, those two are quite like interesting, just small kind of culture differences, but very, very, very good to know.
Yeah. And I mean, that's fascinating, I think, for anyone selling anything in a different market. Because in Europe, like, my phone rings and, you leave a voicemail. I'm never going to answer it unless I know who it
Exactly.
is. Um, and yeah, that moving quickly, knowing I see that in some of the folks I work with in the US, and I get that now. Um, I'm curious, without, as you mentioned, the bio of what Dexory is, like a world first product. Um, has that made it easier to sell or more challenging?
Definitely more challenging.
Yeah.
Because if you would come in and say, I mean, yeah, we're launching a smartphone. It's like an iPhone, but it does X. It helps you obviously kind of create a background, and like people will know, okay, I need a phone for XYZ. So it's much easier to kind of like pinpoint that need to product. Of course, the competition is a different story and it's a lot more complicated. So the more kind of well known your area is, the more people will be acting in it, right? But when you kind of come to the table with what we do, which is a different type of automation that a lot of our customers haven't even thought about. I mean, in logistics, there's a number of kind of robots that have been operating for a while now, and conveyor belts are automated and all that stuff. But the specific use case that we're working on, which is around inventory, it's not really something that people have thought about before. So you kind of have to help them understand, first of all, the needs. Secondly, they have to build a business case, and then they can get the solution. What's really good is the fact that once we start having more and more customers and we have the case studies out there, then yeah, that's making things a lot easier, especially if you have big brand names on it.
Yeah, the brand name is, like, I always say, go for the brand names at the beginning, and it opens so many doors because it's gives you credibility. No one, like, you don't want to always be the first mover. And so to know that, like, oh, well, so and so has bought in, then I'll follow so and so. So I think it's really worth for anyone out there looking to build a business of any kind. As soon as you get the brands on your books, it is a big door opener.
Yeah, yeah.
And when it comes to selling, do you focus on the problem you're trying to solve or the future vision that they could have by using Dexory?
It's an interesting point, and it kind of has to be a mixture of both, just depending on who you're selling to, right? So we segment our ICP in kind of different levels. Naturally, kind of the higher you go in the hierarchy of a company, the longer term and the vision kind of focused, the more vision focused your message can be. But due to the nature of what we're selling, you kind of have to have all the different stakeholders properly aligned. So the people that will sign things off are the ones that are working operation level in a warehouse in our case, and they will kind of care about the immediate. Okay, what is this going to do for me tomorrow? It's not about like a year from now or anything else like that. So you have to have a mixture of messages, but always kind of have that vision one in the pocket. And what we're seeing a lot, kind of going back to the start of the podcast as well, is usually works quite well when a founder delivers that vision message. And you can always kind of bring that in as like, okay, this is what we're building, and kind of putting also a person behind the business also kind of helps a lot. Yeah, I feel that's been something that we've been utilizing quite a bit, especially since some of the deals that we're working on are at a global level. And then they could activate locally, but obviously the intention is to grow with that company in a lot of different markets.
I think honestly, it's so important not to undervalue the founder role in that process. And a lot of the technical founders that I've worked with that are like, oh, I need to hire a salesperson. And I'm like, no, you're the best person to step into that role. Like, fine, you don't need to do the, after sales and all that stuff, but to come in and no one can speak to the product like you can, because it literally is channeling through your veins. It's your DNA. And, you can bring that story, like just no one will do that better. And to what we were saying earlier about the founder mode, manager mode, like, don't delegate that. That's the thing we can't delegate. Delegate everything else, but going around to investors, customers, and new hires and get them really excited about the vision.
Exactly.
And I'm curious, I think it's such, selling is selling, whether it's a robot or a service or, I don't know, glass of water. It's, the principles are always the same. When you're thinking about, the ICP and thinking about, as you mentioned, that kind of ladder of folks that you need to work through. I know in the work that I do that, organizational alignment is rarely a thing that exists. And I help people pull that together. However, when you do a sales side, the organizational misalignment shows up because you've got to convince folks across that chain to bring Dexory on, but it needs to work if the organization's working. How do you navigate aligning an organization as part of that sales process?
Yeah, I wish I could kind of say you probably need a coach to help you guys kind of get together and align on what you want to do. It starts with a very strong discovery process in sales. So what we're trying to kind of really push our teams and then coach them, help them with is have very, very kind of good ways of understanding what an organization's problems are, starting from the bottom up and or top down, depending a little bit how we get in, how the contact kind of works. And I feel like if you're good at having those on paper and putting together a very strong ROI model for that particular customer, you can then kind of sell that across any of the different stakeholders because no one's going to say no to value. It's just a matter of kind of understanding who the decision makers are, and if you feel like any of them is slipping, quickly kind of bringing them back on track and showing them that kind of like TLC, because we've had instances where things were signed off and everything was fine, and then randomly somebody kind of appeared out of nowhere that were not kind of brought on board. And to be honest, we've made mistakes where we thought like, oh, they're just going to align internally and that's it. But practically, you just don't know exactly what message somebody's sharing about you, right? So you have to kind of have a little bit of control on that. So we're really kind of pushing the teams to try and jump back in and kind of build that relationship with whoever was left out, and then be the ones to share the message rather than rely on your customers' stakeholders. Regardless of how strong a sponsor is with a customer, you just never know how they're positioning things and how things might fall through. So I feel like, there's a matter of like doing your homework really well, putting that into hardcore numbers, because those numbers are at the end of the day what everyone kind of cares about, and then just align your stakeholders all the time and be the ones to tell that story.
Yeah, I mean, great, so valuable, because I think it's so easy to forget, or we think that we've got our one, stakeholder internally, but they have a job, and their job isn't to sell our products. So we've got
Exactly.
to help them. We've got to create, be there, be their second voice. But yeah, always, control the narrative, because no one will do it better than you. Love that. As you reflect on this journey that you've had as a, co-founder of Dexory over the past few years, and you think about your trajectory going ahead, any reflections or things that you want to definitely take with you as part of this journey?
I'm starting to feel like it's hard to kind of put it into words again, but there's been a few things over the summer where it's because of a lot happening, and we've been fundraising and all that stuff. So kind of mentally, I think I was quite exhausted. There are a few things I've kind of put on the back burner myself, and kind of my intention for, well, it's already in the second half of the year, but usually kind of September onwards, you kind of consider the second half of the year, is to really kind of bring them back and not allow myself to not stay on top of things. It goes back to that kind of leading by example. And I think, I was kind of hiding behind a few really big goals that I had, and that's kind of a few things slip. So I think for me, the big learning would be, if you find things that you think are really important, just don't let them slip, because regardless of how big of a team you're building and so on, they're not going to be picked up unless you're very intentional of like passing them on to somebody. So I'm just trying to always kind of, staying on top of things, I think is very important, regardless of how mad things go. And the other part, I think, always kind of evolve I think our hiring processes always kind of learn and go back to seeing, okay, who's kind of doing really well and why is that, where are they coming from, like how did we kind of bring them on board, like exactly what did we do there, and then try and kind of learn from that continuously and kind of keep enhancing it, because at the end of the day we're going to be only as good as our people, and as those people become more, then staying on top of that is going to be essential.
Yeah, definitely. And it's an ongoing process, as you mentioned with everything. Okay, Oana. Well, thank you so much for your time. As a wrap-up question, I'm asking folks, because they come to me always with problems and stressors, but we both know that in order to do this role as a leader, as a founder, we need to have our own personal resilience. So everyone comes to me and goes, here's what's keeping me up at night. So I want to ask you, what's helping you sleep at night?
Knowing that I have to wake up in the morning and be be fresh for another day. No, I think I try and focus on the positives. So every single day and sometimes like every single hour. I think I had a day last week where I was telling one of my co-founders, I can't believe today has literally been like one positive, one negative every single hour. It's just like been one of the biggest kind of roller coasters I've had in a while of a day. And it's kind of, I think it's also in the founder's nature, like you kind of have to pick the things that are going well and hold on to those and use those to give you energy, because otherwise very, very quickly you'll give up and give in, right? So I think, yeah, just kind of spending a couple of seconds when I go to bed, like, oh yeah, it was quite good today. And then hopefully we're going to have more of those tomorrow, rather than like, oh, that's not been done or that's delayed. Or so that's kind of what I'm trying to kind of get the other co-founders as well to focus on, and even kind of my leadership team. It's every day like, but this went really well. So yeah, let's do more of that.
Exactly. I mean, we talk a lot about the founder optimism, but we need it, because if we listed all the things that haven't been done or yet to do or didn't go right, I don't think we would. We just go get a job and
Exactly.
because what's the point? So I love that. I think it's so important to, there's always one thing that's gone well a day. I guarantee you. Important to focus on that, and take that energy and bring that into the next day on how to do better and build better. Well, thank you for your time and your wisdom on the podcast. And for those listening, I'll make sure that we link up all the articles and context that we referenced today. But thank you, Oana, so much. Excited to see Dexory soar even more.
Thank you so much, Gillian.